Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our AI and University Commercialization Practices webinar. I am so thrilled to have you here today and to be joined by two spectacular panelists. We'll go to the next slide. My name is Kirsten Loita. I'm a partner at Osage University Partners. I lead up our university relations efforts here. I am joined today by two colleagues and very good friends, Marc Sedam and James Zanewicz. I'll have them each introduce themselves as we go forward. Marc, do you want to start?
Sure. See everybody. I'm Marc Sedam. I'm as it says, the VP for Technology Opportunities and Ventures at NYU. Been in tech transfer for, 30-ish years and have focused a lot in the last year about implementing AI. So happy to talk to everybody about it.
Great. Thank you, James.
Hey everyone, James Zanewicz, the Chief Strategy Officer for the School of Medicine and National Primate Research Center at Tulane. And I am no longer a tech transfer person, though I have a long background in that. I do business development, which for us is any kind of corporate investor, foundation partnership back and forth in any way, comms marketing, crisis management, strategic initiatives, all that kind of stuff. So a little tangential to what Marc does, work in many ways with functions like his, but in a different way. So excited for this conversation.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today and preparing all these materials ahead of time for us. I know some of this you've talked about before in other formats, but we're really excited to have both of you here today talking about this subject and what each of your institutions and your respective areas that your institutions are doing with regards to AI. We'll go to the next slide. The slides and a recording of this webinar are going to be available on OUP's partner portal, and a recording will also be available via our YouTube channel. You'll see some QR codes down there that'll lead you to the two places where you can find these. The partner portal is an online portal just for the tech transfer officers and researchers at our partner universities. It's full of relevant tech transfer and startup content. Once you're in the portal, for which you do need to register if you have not already done so, you'll find a downloadable presentation deck and video link to this webinar on the webinars page. You can also find this on the YouTube channel, as I mentioned, if you don't actually, if you aren't at one of our academic institutions and have access to that partner portal. You're going to be receiving a link later this week. For anyone who registered for this webinar, you'll be receiving a link later this week to both the presentation itself as well as a copy of the slides. We do have an upcoming webinar that we did want to mention. We're going to start a new series called Meet the VCs. This is going to be on May 23rd, and the first of these will feature Jennifer Griffin from Mission BioCapital and Joe Calora from Portal Innovations. Both of these are VCs that also have shared lab facilities that they offer to the startup companies that work with them. So we're excited to start this new series, and if you have suggestions for what we should be doing and who you'd like us to talk to on Meet the VCs, please let us know about that as well. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. A shorter intro on OUP for those of you who don't know us. We are a venture capital fund that partners with academic institutions to invest in their startups, typically by exercising participation rights available through the licenses. As part of this relationship, the institutions share in our profits and also receive programmatic support on tech transfer and academic startups, including videos like this. We're now in our fourth fund, and we've made investments in over 130 companies. I think it's approaching 140 of all areas of deep science. And many of those companies have had successful exits either through IPOs or mergers and acquisitions. And the next slide will then show some of our portfolio companies and the breadth of areas that we invest in. We're always happy to talk about our model. So if you do have any questions about us, always feel free to reach out to us. We'll go on to the next slide, which just shows our agenda for the day. We'll have Marc first talking about the AI-enabled TTO, the use of AI and machine learning and tech transfer. And then James will talk about AI in healthcare and how Tulane Medicine is leveraging the next wave. So with that, actually, I did need to mention, if you have questions, please do let us know. You can let us know throughout this webinar any questions that you have for Marc or James on the topic. Please use the Q&A tool on your toolbar here. I will be going through those and judging when we want to be able to ask those questions. We are going to try to get through most of the presentations within the first hour of this webinar, and then we'll hold the last half an hour, 20 minutes to 30 minutes for the questions that have come in. If we have something that's really pertinent at that time, we will ask at that time, but otherwise we'll be holding off the questions mainly until the end. So I apologize. With that, Marc, I will now pass it off to you for your presentation.
Fair enough. All right. Well, so this is very similar, though not quite identical to the presentation that we gave at Autumn. So if you saw it at the annual meeting, stay for the slide. Maybe don't stay for the slides, but stay for the editorializing that I'll throw over the top of this. So next slide. So the first thing to think about, or that your staff will think about, or that you might be thinking about is, okay, we know AI is here. It's going to be significant, but is it going to replace people? Is it going to replace my job? And the answer is really no. I think positions are probably not going to disappear through the use of AI in tech transfer, but I think for the most part, I think about it as what does it enable you to do? Though I would say as you go forward, I could see the growth of offices not necessarily needing to go quite as fast. So as at Langone Health or NYU, as we go from having 170 disclosures to 370 disclosures to 600 disclosures in a couple of years, which is our goal, we won't scale our staff at the pace that you would think we would have to in order to handle all of that. We're going to use AI to actually help us scale. So next slide. So I'm going to start just by framing. I know we all know what the term is, but maybe not quite how it applies and how we're going to do. So think about things from AI in terms of the data set that you're using and then the model that you're creating. So generative AI is really just about pulling in a bunch of data and trying to predict what the next most likely thing is to happen. So the data set is equally as important as what's called the foundation model. The foundation model are the things that you're thinking about: GPT-4, Claude, Gemini. Those are the foundation models that are going to use, but the data that is used to train the model is equally as important. And we'll talk about our data sets and the future of this stuff in a few minutes. I think that this is the future of our career and actually is probably the piece of what's going to come in the next 5 to 10 years that's actually going to enable tech transfer to live up to its potential, because it's going to save a lot of the scut work that we all have to do and actually enable us to do more thinking and more proactive business development rather than just making sure forms are filled out properly and trying to do the blocking and tackling. My view is that AI in one form or another is going to take care of about 70% of the blocking and tackling of an office, which either scares you or you're absolutely excited to hear that, because it's going to leave you to do more thinking and doing and less just filling out forms. So next slide. The way to think about it is how AI works is it's really just designed to predict the next most likely outcome. Works great with text. So if you upload, as some of these large tech companies have done, billions and billions and billions of web pages, and you create a model that says, well, what's the next most likely word? So in this example, the best thing about AI is its ability to, and you would get, these are the top 5 possible outcomes of those questions of the 3, 6, 8 words before it. And that's all it's doing. So it might give you team, it might give you do, and based on that, the next word so it's just a series of branch points, right? And this is how things like hallucination happens, which we'll talk about. The good news is that there are ways to modulate the inputs of AI prompts so that the outputs become much more knowable, much more predictable, and much less risky for the way that we all think about it. So next slide. So a question we get asked a lot is, how did we start? And the answer is a little bit of serendipity, as most good things are. So part of NYU is NYU Langone Health, which is a giant academic medical center and healthcare provider. And our institution was looking at the benefit of AI to improve patient care, to think about the hundreds of thousands of patients that come through Langone Health every year, and how can we improve the speed of getting information to the patients, looking at things like our images. And so as a healthcare institution, we were working with Microsoft and OpenAI 2.5 years ago. So before this all broke, we were asking the question of how do these tools benefit the patient? And so we had what we still believe is the first private instance of GPT in the US, in the university. So the private instance is really important in that none of the data that we upload was shared to train the model further. There were no data leaks. And when I heard about this, I thought, well, if we can put patient information in this AI tool that's PII and PHI and highly restricted and has to be very, very secure, then the stuff we all do is really kind of not a big deal. So it's business information, it is patent information, but if the security is good enough for patient health records, then it's good enough for us. And so I simply asked the question of our chief information officer, can I play with this stuff? And they were actually starting to think about how we could use AI beyond patient care. And ours was the first group that expressed any interest in just using it to do business. So we really started. We brought on a compliance manager named John Curie, and this is my first editorializing. John Curie has left the building. He went and got a different and better job, so he's no longer there. We're going to post a job to do John's work. So if any of y'all on this call want to work in AI and you want to advance this, give me a week and that posting is going to be on LinkedIn, and please apply because we need somebody to continue to pick up the work. John was trained as an attorney. He was not a computer scientist. He was not somebody who was a techie, but he's just intellectually curious about AI. And all I said he said, can I play with it? I said, yeah, go play. Come back to me in a month and tell me what you did. I don't want to know how you do it. Just go and make something happen. So next slide. So one of the things that we worried about in the beginning was this issue of hallucinations. And this is where for tech transfer, the message I want to make sure everybody understands is we can control for this. So when we first started to look at it, we wanted to make sure when we're looking at things like licensing and compliance and are we owed things, how do we make sure we don't tell somebody that they owe us $185,000 when they owe us 180 cents, right? So the thing about hallucinations to understand with respect to AI is that the foundation model sits in the middle, okay? Before the model, you have the data that you're going to use to either train. In our case, we weren't training a model, but we're going to restrict the inputs of the data that the model is to read on, right? And then the outputs of the model are restricted by the prompt. So there's two ways that you can control the output of AI. One is to say, don't look at a billion websites for information. Look only at these two documents, these three licenses. And then the prompt tells you what you want to extract out of them. And through what is now called prompt engineering, you can modify your prompt, modify your prompt, modify your prompt to get an output that is, I will say, I won't say 100% accurate. I will say 99+% accurate because you're never actually kind of done. So you can control hallucinations in a way that when you go off and say, write a bio for James Zanewicz, it's probably going to be right. It also might say James is an astronaut. He may be an astronaut, but you never know. So we don't have to worry about those kind of things. Next slide. The public versus private is really important. All the work that we're going to talk about here that we've done at NYU Langone Health is with private models. So behind a firewall, we happen to use Microsoft Azure. None of the information is used to train the model. None of the information actually leaves the institution. Do not play around with anything that is not public information on a public LLM. Now, market data, market research, who's out there, show me, pull things in, that part's fine. So in a lot of ways, if you don't have a private instance, you're thinking about using this, you can take your published license templates, for example, and start to use some of the prompts on this because you have a public license. So what you're trying to get out of that license isn't confidential information. When you start to add financial terms and you start to add patent information, obviously that's confidential, and you want to make sure it's behind a private instance. And so never the twain shall meet. Next slide. So we started, as I mentioned, with using Microsoft, trying to figure out the patient-facing interactions. We created our own foundation model called NYU Tron, which is specific for healthcare. I'll make another pitch. We are actually looking for consortium members. I have some information to send James because he expressed some interest in this, on having 8 to 12 academic medical centers that we want to use our foundation model for medicine as a way to create applications and create effectively an operating system for medical centers to use AI to improve the quality of care for patients. So we're looking to have 8 to 12 universities academic medical centers to participate. We all play off the model. We all create outputs of it, and we share it with everybody. And then in a couple of years, we can release that to the world. So next slide, we talk about this. So the thought for me is, yeah, I'm at NYU now, but I spent 10 years at the University of New Hampshire, which was very, very small. And having had a decade of experience in a small institution and now 3 years of experience in a much larger institution, the issues are actually kind of the same. In a small tech transfer office, you don't have enough resources, you don't have enough people, it's really hard to scale. You're bogged down by a lot of administrative work, and so you don't really have any time to go do the hunting and gathering of new ideas. In a large office, the issues are they're different, but the result is the same, is you need to be at scale. You have to, we are a $1.4 billion research institution. We have to know where all those ideas are, and we can't get to all of them because our administrative overhead is scalably huger. So, we have hundreds of patents and thousands of licenses, and it's sort of the same issue. So as you grow and as you get bigger, you still don't have any time to go out and do the hunting and gathering that you need. And so the little epiphany that we had was we have a lot of repetitive tasks. So the problem with scale is that the scut work that everybody has to do gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. We're doing thousands of material transfer agreements a year. And how do you get over the top of that? You look for repetitive tasks that can be automated and use AI in those places. And so that was the conceit that we started with was, in fact, what I told the staff was, pick the parts of your job that you hate and you wish you never had to do and try to automate them. And if you do, you're going to free up your own time, which is even better. And that's how we started. So next slide. Go to the next one. So we started here with 40 people at Langone to just told to go play. In 2 weeks, we didn't have a use case. In the fourth week, we had 2 use cases. By the way, this is across the whole institution, and those 2 use cases were ours. And within 6 more months, which was when the slide was drawn up, there were 200 use cases across the institution. So we're finding ways just over everybody's operation to do this kind of work. So next one. So just in terms of how we started, we're using a secure, we call it a playground. We had to create use cases with prompts. And each time you entered the system, you had to restart because for security purposes, you don't want to store any of the information in the system because that's how you have data leaks. So we just went with the assumption of we'll use it, we'll back out, we'll use it, we'll back out. And then we stored a bunch of our prompts and a bunch of our data sets on our secure cloud so that we could always just tap into them. So next slide.
Marc, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Sorry, going back to the timeline that you mentioned, when was the starting point and when was now? So how long has it been since then? Sorry.
So now we hired John in like the middle of May of 2023. And I would say it took about 2 months for us to start to really play around with it. So June, July. So between July 1st and now is everything that we're going to show.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. So where we started was just, let's look at things like reviewing contracts and look for compliance, and then try to get more precise as we move along and see if we can build some advanced applications. So next one. The thing about creating prompts is it's an iterative process, and I'll share some information about prompts before. It's really just a flow chart to think about how to frame it out. So you'll get the slides. This is really just more for you to look at as you go along. The important thing to think about when you start using these tools is to have a data set that is your QC set. So we have I think we have 15 license agreements that we use as a QC set. So why do you need that? Well, because these tools are improving. So when you hear about GPT, we all probably heard about GPT-2, right? And then it was like 3 months later, it was 3, then it was 3.5, then it was 4. So every time they change that, the model is actually changing. And what you find is that when OpenAI or Anthropic changes the model, your outputs actually change. So sometimes for the better and sometimes for the very worse. So what you need is a data set that you can train on the updates. So when we went from GPT 3.5 to 4, our outputs were worse. And we're like, well, it's supposed to get that's some, I think I did the double thumbs up with something in the background. So as OpenAI was trying to put some more controls on the outputs of GPT, it became less precise. So we then ran the same prompts when they updated it, and we didn't get any of the same outputs. We had to rewrite the prompt and spent probably a day rewriting it so that the outputs were the same as it was for 3.5. So you have to have data sets for any of the prompts that you're going to write. The next slide. Then we started refining. So looking at, okay, now we know we can do it. We can extract information, but could we take action on the information, and how is the quality of the work? The next slide. Then from there started to say, what were the strategies behind it? So we knew it could work. We felt like the outputs were reliable. And then where did we want to spend our time, effort, and energy? So where did we want to focus in to see if we could really modernize, operationalize our activities, and then see where we could extend our prompts into other areas of the application. So I think it's really important as you think about how do you sell this up the chain, is to pick a couple of early examples where you're either going to get financial value or say FTE savings that you can calculate early and share. So you get some really early wins and show the institution that it's valuable to do this. You're not just playing around because you're a nerd and you want to look at AI, but you're actually thinking about the bottom line of the institution. So next slide. So here's some of the quantification of what we've done. So first is we just looked at contract analysis. This is just what was in our agreements that we were owed, that we didn't know we were owed and never collected. And so we reviewed about 500 contracts. By the way, when we hired John, I told him as a compliance manager, it would probably take him a fiscal, for every year that he worked for us, he would probably get through 3 fiscal years of documents. So that maybe he would stick around for 2 years. We'd get through 6 fiscal years. We'd see if we had any obligations that we were owed, and that would be it. And he'd probably quit because that seems kind of boring, right? And I literally said that to him. Within 3 weeks, it was, what about this AI stuff? So within 6 months, John had actually looked at 15 fiscal years of our agreements and combed through everything. And so he actually did the job that we thought he was going to do in about 6 months overall. And this was the first 5 years. We looked at 500 agreements, and we found $2.7 million in the cash cushions. And within 30 days of starting to collect on that, we already recovered what it's now about $300,000. So if you're thinking about how to sell this, we spent 2 months learning, we extracted information, and within 90 days from the start of the project, we'd received $250,000 now, $300,000 in money received. So the story was, well, we paid for ourselves, and now we want to use this and save even more money. We found a total of 2.7 million. We have 1.3 million on payment plans and 1.2 million that we're still continuing to work on. So my expectation is that we're going to get around $2 million from this activity. And that's just in the first year of operation, plus the FTE savings time. So what John calculated his own salary savings was, we expected it to take him 2 years, and he did it in 6 to 8 months. So all that extra time, we can use those savings to do better things and to do more. This, by the way, will be very valuable to your management. So next one. In terms of time savings, when we started to look at how to automate these things, we went from the original process of how long does it take you to review an agreement and see what's in it, took about 2 hours. That was reduced to 5 minutes. We looked at SaaS agreements, which usually are 80 to 120 pages. That would take, just to look at the changes between 2 documents, it would take a half hour, 40 minutes, down to 2 minutes. So we're just saving all this time. So instead of doing 4 agreements a day, we were doing 20 agreements a day. And then once we got good at it and we increased some of our capacity on the technical side, we actually once uploaded an entire fiscal years of documents at one time. So we did 100 agreements basically and did the outputs in the same 5 minutes. So just the scale at which you can improve is remarkable. So next one.
Actually, can I ask you a couple questions first, Mark? We have a couple questions from the audience that I want to get to right now just because they're really relevant to what you're talking about. Can you just describe a little bit more about what you were finding on the money that was owed? Is this money that you had just been missing, or was it outstanding invoices,
There
or?
were some were patent expenses that we didn't like. We said, oh, you don't have to pay for this, but in 2 years you have to start paying, and we like forgot to collect. Or there were milestone payments or diligence milestones that were in the agreements that, like, we all know we do this, right? Like, you forget, or your systems aren't that great. And so all we really did was extract all of the obligations in the agreements and then looked at our database and said, how many of these obligations did we actually try to enforce? And the answer was, well, $2.7 million worth. We didn't even try. So what was interesting about it was when we told some of the companies, they're like, oh yeah, we were wondering if you were going to ask us about that. So, it was not a shock, but we all do a bad job of invoicing sometimes. And so I guarantee, I've done audits in all 3 universities I've worked in. I've always found at least 30% of the running royalty rate in the couch cushions by doing an audit. And so now that we've automated this audit process, it's a layup to you want to boost your the revenue that you report. You want to make yourself look good to your supervisor. This is the way to go.
And then the next question is actually more about QC. Can you talk about what your AI got wrong actually in the internal audit and how you made sure the answers were correct before you reached out?
Oh, I mean, it's an iterative process. So
Yeah.
you create a prompt, you run it, it doesn't do it. You do it again and again and again and again. It took us about 30 in the beginning, 30 to 40 hours to write the prompt that would be effectively perfect. So you do have to put in about a week's worth of effort with everything that you want to accomplish. And it's wrong the whole time until it's right. And so when I say it's wrong, it's not like it makes stuff up. It's just incomplete. It's imprecise. You change your words. You forget to say, well, it's a diligence milestone, but not a payment milestone. So you want to say, look for payment or diligence milestones, and you capture more information. So it really is learning the language of kind of prompt generation to do that.
And so then it would pull up a list, and then you would check that against your own records again.
We'd check it against, we
exactly.
would check it against the agreement and then see how close it was. And then eventually you learn the language of the prompt and you learn the language of your own agreements. And then it starts to, I don't want to say it thinks for itself, but it starts to actually learn to be broader. I don't want to I could nerd out on stuff. I'm not gonna. But there are ways that you could play around with things like the temperature of the tool that will allow you to capture a little more information than being more restrictive.
All right. That's one weedy question too. Is it okay if I ask a weedy question? How do you actually share the agreement with the AI agent? Do you upload a file? Do you copy?
It's an upload. Yep. It's all an upload.
Thank you.
Yep. You bet. And the providers of these tools are starting to realize that people want to upload a lot of data, and so we just have folders on our shared drives that we point to. So we say like it's like anything else. You want to like create a PDF, you click through, pull it in, upload it, and actually you upload the prompts so you don't have to write them every time. So we then extended this to finance, and we're able to do reconciliations, which was also pretty cool. Like, were our books correct? Did we actually receive things that we had sent out? And that was another part where even just looking at reconciling one agreement went from 45 minutes to 5 minutes. We're starting to be able to pull information out of different formats. So first it was Word documents. Now we're able to look at things like Excel or PowerPoint, which is pretty amazing. And in one case, we took a 600 row Excel spreadsheet and combined it with a 400 row Excel spreadsheet and looked to see what the differences of the spreadsheet were. And it took about 45 seconds. So it took a project that would be 3 days and did it almost instantaneously. Next one. So these are the prompts that we're doing, and I'll get to those in a second, but we're continuing to extend these along. Next one. Okay, here's where we're going. Next slide. Prompts are leaving, bots are coming. So you need to learn how to do the prompt development, but also know that it's going to be almost like learning grammar. You know how to do it, but then you're going to stop thinking about it and you're going to start using these different tools. So there are now things, we call them agents or assistants, where it's more of a flow chart and less of a prompt. So you're starting to say, I want you to look for this, and this, and you're kind of It's almost like Legos. You're stacking logic on top of each other. It starts to look like programming workflows if you've ever done computer programming. So we're going to move away from prompts and towards the bots. Next slide. This is what the Microsoft Assistant looks like. So skip that and go to the next one. Where we're going is at Langone is we're trying to kill the disclosure. And the reason we want to do it is not because we don't want the disclosures, but we want to kill all the non-productive time used to get a disclosure. And if you think about what a disclosure is, which is a form that you wish the faculty to fill in based on the document that they've already written, a disclosure is a prompt. And so we're basically creating a series of techniques where we can ask our researchers for their presentation, poster, or journal article, and we'll create the disclosure for them on one end, and then we'll pull in market data on the other side and fill the disclosure out for them and kick it back to them with all of the work that we would have normally done automatically. So it's pretty slick. Like, we're going to do this by a chat bot. So we figure we've removed about 4 to 6 hours on our side of work to get a proper disclosure, and obviously same amount of time on the faculty side. The next slide. So it kind of looks like this. We'll basically ask them for a paper. We're almost done with this, by the way. We ask them for a paper. They can upload it to our disclosure assistant, and it will kick out a filled out disclosure to them that we can then send it to them for review and signature. So they don't have to do anything. They just write their paper and then send it in. And so you can imagine how many of us have to chase disclosures down when we're interested in it, right? You don't have to do anything now. You just say email. You can either send them a link and say upload it, or email me your paper and I'll create the disclosure. And 3 minutes later, you're going to get a link. So we're headed here, and we've calculated about 95% reduction in FTE time to do this. And I'll talk about this in a second. All right, next one. So there's a lot of challenges, and I think the startup costs are what people think about, just in terms of how much does it cost to do this. It's actually kind of inexpensive, I think. Probably for even a small office, it might cost you between $5,000 and $15,000 to sort of start up. But the pitch is spend 15, make 100, or save actually the extra time. It's a pretty low ante in. The more technical know-how you have, the better, but it's not requirement. Again, John was a lawyer. He had no technical chops and learned how to do all this stuff in a pretty short period of time. Next one. We transferred these ideas to both Columbia and the University of Glasgow, and it worked really great. Next slide. So this is not just only us, only we can do it, but we're actually going to transfer this to everybody else. And so where are we going in the future? Next one. I think we're going to start seeing, I know we're going to start seeing patent drafting done by AI, which is going to drive down a lot of costs. LLM, the era of an LLM is over. These small language models, bespoke models for the things that you want to do is where it's going to happen. And we should all look at this as being an executive assistant. So don't be scared, figure out ways to make your life a little bit better. I think I only have like 2 slides left. So this is the really cool thing that we're working on right now, where we're actually going to be able to verbally speak to our data. So we have a download of all of our information. So we export all of the data in our IP management system every night and stick it on the server. But this will be like the Siri of your own information. So we can say, I don't know what we're going to call it. We'll call it John, because since he left, so we're sad. And you're like, hey, John, please tell me the royalty rate in the Pfizer agreement that we signed in 2017 with Dr. Smith. And it'll say, the rate was 3.5%, and here's what you're owed. So we actually get verbal cues. So if you're walking around and want to know, I forgot what that agreement looked like, you can actually ask the database to tell you, and it'll start to tell you. So this is when we start to get a little Skynet-y, but if you can imagine how much productivity you can pull out of this stuff, it's pretty amazing. You can even speak to the database and ask it to send an email out based on the outputs. We're worried that's probably another couple months for us, but now you don't even have to do the work. You're just talking to your assistant and saying, please do this for me. Next one. And then lastly, we are giving, so we've done all the stuff, we've done these prompts, and we're giving them all away. So this QR code will send you a link to the NYU website where you can register and download all of the prompts. So we're really looking at this as a way to give everybody the same tools that we've spent the last year developing. We're going to continue to develop new tools. We're going to continue to release them on this website. Two things that I ask of everybody. One is that only the directors of the offices are the ones who sign. So we're not looking for, like, if you're curious and you say, I want them, that's not what we're doing. The accountability for the prompts has to be with the director of your office. We're not giving them to nonprofits, to for-profits or commercial enterprises. And we actually are asking you to kind of respect that and don't take them and then give them to a consultant who's helping you. We want this to be within the academic community for a little while, so that we can all figure out how to do this better. And Autumn is actually bringing up an AI special interest group that will be able to talk about and share the prompts. Why are we doing it this way? Because I actually know that if you have an office of 1 or an office of 70, you can use these tools. And I want you to use the tools yourself and not just hand them to somebody else and say, do the work for me, because this is going to be the future of our profession. In a year, maybe we'll change the point of view, but that's how we're developing it all. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Marc. We have a lot of questions.
Is that the last one?
We have a lot of questions still, but I'm gonna just ask you one of them, and then I'm gonna pass to James, and then we'll hold the rest of the questions until the end. Who within the institution funded the Azure license for you?
So that was where we already had it. That was when I mentioned that the healthcare system was doing it and they already had it. But I have to say, one of the reasons we presented these slides, and you can get them from Osage, those time savings and FTE savings, I know of at least 24 universities who have used those slides to go upsell to their institutions, and it's been a relatively easy process for them. There hasn't been a lot of pushback. So look, I worked at UNH. We live free or die, and free. Like, we had nothing. We could easily have brought this up at UNH. So even if you don't have a lot of resources, you can find the money and you'll make it within 6 months.
And that is actually a nice pass off, I think, to James. So James, go ahead and let's go through your slides and how you are using AI within your business at Tulane.
No, thanks. And I feel like every time I hear Marc's presentation, I get something new and learn something more, because there's so much in it. So I always love sitting through those as well. So I'm going to talk from a little bit of a different lens, given my role and some of the focus, and really focused on not just kind of how can we use it in our inner office structure, but how can we bring this into academic medical centers and healthcare systems as a whole to benefit not only our scientists and researchers, our own operational processes, but the patients that we're all here to serve as well. Next slide. So I think, don't be afraid, as Marc said, be afraid not to use it, not to use it. And this is a tool that's going to be really, really helpful as we go forward. It's going to be everywhere. And as Marc just said, even if you're not at NYU Langone and you don't have access to the under the hood special parts and things that they have, there are things out there that you can use and leverage, just like we have at Tulane. As Marc also said, we have to know what's being done with your data, what's being kept confidential. Make sure you know depending on which chatbot, which portal you're using, can you put in non-confidential information? Do you have to put in confidential information? So definitely be strategic about what you do. And realize that this is not just the future of our field, but I think it's the future of most fields. And where you see all these roles in AI right now, eventually it's just going to be how we do the job. And the role in AI will go away, because it's just going to be something baked into everything we do. And if you're concerned about how this is so new and so scary, remember that spell check from Word that we all used, a billion years ago, that was AI. It's been around forever. We just didn't call it that. So think about that, and the fact that this, while it's gotten really hot and really much in the lexicon lately, it has been around for a long, long time. Next slide, please. So how did I get into this? Really, I got pulled into the Alliance for AI in Healthcare, which is the industry association, much like Bio or AdvaMed for biotech or MedTech for AI in healthcare as a field. And that's everything from drug discovery to clinical trials and looking at digital twins for patients for precision medicine, to how we analyze office functions or back end like billing or operational things and use AI to do that more efficiently. Why did we join it? I felt like this was what was coming next. We joined shortly before the pandemic, so right before it hit as well. The value we've gotten is incredible connections, the ability to be part of the community, but also to help influence where the field is going and to really ensure that as regulation happens, it's regulation in a smart way that allows us to still innovate, to still move things forward, to operationalize in ways that make sense. And for that, it's just been a tremendous value in the process of doing that. We've gotten tremendous exposure as well. And I encourage any academic center or other folks who are in this field to look at joining the AAIH. I'm treasurer, so in full disclosure, I am on the board. I am an officer of the AAIH, so I'm probably legally obligated to tell you guys that you should do that. But I genuinely believe in the organization and think everyone should investigate that. And you can learn more at theaaih.org. Next slide, please. Marc went through a lot of these, but there's a wide world of AI help, and this is just some of those things. We have in our office at Tulane focused on ChatGPT, Claude 2, now Claude 3, and are starting to work with Jasper AI. I encourage everyone to play with different things for different tasks and multiple things for each task. I'm going to give you some examples of things we've done, and we've tried them in different avenues to see, what does GPT give us? What does Claude give us? What does Jasper give us? To see how different nuances come out, and that can be things that fit the task better or fit your personality better, depending on what kind of responses you get. And we have team members who are using Firefly and Fathom to take notes in meetings and do their task lists and lots of things like that. So there are different tools for different things everywhere. Next slide, please. I encourage people to remember that AI is human-ish too. Treat it like a colleague, teammate, or intern. Please and thank you go a long way, because one day when the robot overlords take over, you're going to want them to realize you were one of the nice ones and not one of the mean ones. It's iterative. Go back and forth and be conversational with it. It's okay to have a dialogue back and forth with AI, and that will actually help it learn not just what you're looking for, but your nuances and your style and your tone, and help to do things in a way that is more like you. And as part of that, I just want to point out this image was made with AI when I asked it to give me something that looked like AI and humans working together. And so these are some of the things you can get. Next slide, please. Simple things. One of my favorites. We say demeanify on public situations. We use other words sometimes when we're typing into whatever AI chatbot we're using. But say you got an email from one of your investigators, which none of us have ever gotten, basically saying how dumb you are at all aspects of your job, and how if you were better at it, they would have a partnership, they'd be on 60 Minutes and perhaps have won a Nobel Prize. Next clip, please. And so you get a response saying that, and you want to reply, I think you're an idiot too. I'm glad we're on the same page. But instead, you throw in the initial email, you throw in this email, and what you get is something much more appropriate that you should send back. And this is something we play with a lot, where perhaps you're having a tough day or you don't know how to do things. Just kind of throwing in and saying, make this less mean, or make this a little more professional. And sometimes still make it a little more firm than you did, because sometimes the AI assistants can be too nice. But you can play with that a lot for correspondence and cut your time way down. Next slide, please. Prompt perfect. As we're waiting for the bots to come, prompts are still really important. And one of my most important things I learned was this kind of layout for prompts, where you say, acting as a senior business development person with X years of experience in biotech, please do whatever you need done using this kind of data. And you can also say, in the process of doing it, please don't do things, and create the final result in a spreadsheet, a one-page document, a bulleted list, however you want that. And then you can drop in an example, say, here's an example to follow, and upload an example. And switching to this, where just using that first 2 lines where you say, act like a person with X years of experience in this field, really change and nuances what you're looking for. Because sometimes you're looking for something to be more like an admin assistant. Sometimes you're looking for something to be a high level person like us. Sometimes you're looking for someone to think like a venture capitalist, and it can shift what it looks for to have it do that. Also, this image, again, made with AI. So a lot of the stuff in here I've used AI to do. Next slide, please. Simple things like email chains as well. Function like an administrative assistant with a lot of experience and summarize the chain. Don't make anything up. And in the process of completing it, do me a bulleted action list. An example of what I want to see is this. This alone can save you so much time, especially for long, complex email chains where you come in late, cut and paste it, drop it in, ask for the highlight points. Next slide, please. Moving on to more core functions for us, market intelligence. Again, a sample prompt for this is, act like a BD expert with 30 years of experience doing this and get competitive intelligence in a field of vaccine adjuvant. So this is something we actually used at Tulane for TVAT, our OMV vaccine adjuvant. It gave us a list of companies who were in the space. It talked about resources we could use to identify additional companies. And then once we had the initial result, we said, hey, can you expand on market intelligence, give us a few more companies, include some more foundations, and give us more resources that might help us find more things. And it was a little 2-page document, but gave us a lot of information that we could start doing marketing and market intelligence from. Next slide, please, Katie. You can also use it to think like an investor. And this is thanks to Dr. Elaine Ham, who uses AI a good bit as well. You think like an investor analyst with however many years of experience you're looking for, and try and play with different years and see what you get as different answers. It's kind of fun. Say you're working for a life science fund, or if you're not in life sciences and like us, you could say you're working in an engineering fund or a tech fund, and that'll screen out different types of data and create that market report you're looking for. Bulleted size information, and you can ask for trends that could impact the market as you go forward. And again, you can ask for tables, information. You can ask for data in the way you want to see it. You do always have to be careful for those hallucinations Marc referred to before. You can't just take things and run with them. But again, it's an amazing colleague as a tool. And if you treat it more like an intern where you have to check their work a little bit until you're more comfortable and have it more trained, it's a great way to give yourself starts. Next slide, please. Also for non-cons, if you don't have Marc's super fancy version yet, you can drop something in and say, acting like a professional with those years of experience, rewrite this description to demonstrate market potential. And you can ask it to be short, less than 3 paragraphs, and towards the audience you want, which maybe is somebody who doesn't have a PhD in the field. It's that MBA BD person at Pfizer who perhaps has the ability to understand some science, but not deeply. And this can give you those starting points and really improve your efficiencies as you move forward. Next slide, please. Moving past straight work, say you're moderating a panel. I was moderating at Fierce BD&L just a little bit ago, and this is the first time I tried this, and it made my life so much easier. Acting as a top tier moderator with 25 years of experience, and I put in my name, so it actually gave me a script. Said, please draft that panel description and questions with these goals. We had determined as a panel on our call, these are the 5 goals we wanted to hit. Got a really nice result. Then I dropped in the 4 panelists with their names, their title, and the company they were at, and said, please assign the questions to each of them. And then had it redraft the intro with those panels info on my 3rd prompt. Again, this is iterative, as we talked about, talking back and forth. This gave me an exceptional start for my panel packet. I spent probably 15 minutes tweaking it instead of 2 hours putting it together. And again, it's all about those savings of time that Marc talks about. And for your unpaid jobs like this is a tremendous tool.
James, can I interrupt for 15
Please.
seconds? So we have a very similar example. Tariana Stewart on our staff did this same thing, but about a disclosure. And so said, here's the disclosure, pretend you're a tech transfer person. Here's the subject matter. Tell me the questions that I should ask a faculty member. And she got, I think, 12 or 15 questions, sent it to the faculty member who rescheduled the meeting because the questions were good and thoughtful, and he wasn't ready to have the meeting.
Oh, wow.
So you can actually get really, really thoughtful questions about doing the day part of your job. Yep. And we never told them that it was AI enabled, but it was like, oh, you're very thoughtful.
That's great. Next slide, please. And then getting into some marketing and getting things out into the world beyond the non-cons and other things, you can use a paper or a non-con device, and you can drop that information in and say, act like an expert and write a marketing post for LinkedIn, optimize for SEO engagement, with biomedical device companies, can say it's a biomedical engineering specific innovation. And so I did that with one of our posted innovations. And next slide, please. And you can see what we got out. And so this is optimized for LinkedIn because, you know, we have people who are younger than us who like emojis. It threw some in. They kill me, but I leave them in for social because I know they're important. But, you know, this is a really nice post for LinkedIn, and it happened really quickly. You can edit it back a little bit and dial back. If you hate the emojis, you can pull them out. But you can optimize it for different social platforms, for X, for LinkedIn, and you get different nuances and different writing styles based on that. And again, this is a way to optimize a lot, to change a lot. And if you want to have the ability to do multiple posts, say one for more lay public / news media and one for business development type people who might pick up your innovation, you can ask it to create 2 versions, one for the lay populace and one for somebody in business development, and actually get multiple posts in a very short time frame. Again, saving all that back end time from doing it yourself. Next slide, please. So this is something I want to talk about because we have just started in the last week or so exploring Jasper. Jasper is a more strictly for marketing AI tool. It's a paid service. They have less expensive versions and then a more expensive business enterprise version. And if we can hit the next slide, I want to show some of the things I've done with this. We have our Bio on the Bayou event, some of you may have heard about, which is our Gulf South Innovation Conference. It's like the small bio for the Gulf South. I asked it to create an entire campaign for Bio on the Bayou, throwing in the website link saying, for this website, do an entire campaign. It gave us a campaign name, a campaign overview, objectives that it asked, what are the things you want to do? And we said, we want to raise awareness, we want to drive attendance, and we want to foster relationships. You can see the 7 strategies we got, you know, social media, email, better content, working with influencers, sponsorship collaborations, webinars and panels, and media outreach. And if we can hit the next slide, then you can see it gave us some very specific ways to do that as well. And I skipped over some of those, but I said, give us a series of LinkedIn posts to promote Bio on the Bayou. And we got everything from a countdown to how to highlight individual speakers, to how to highlight the networking, to highlight the successes that have come out, final call to register, and a thank you post event. And this all took about 30 seconds. And there was more than just these 2 slides that I show you, but this is incredible for events. And Kirsten, I was going to tell you about this for Equalize, so please don't yell at me.
No, I'm already thinking about how we're going to use it. I do have a couple of questions for you. Have you found, because this is one from the audience, have these types of posts received more engagement? You know,
just starting with them, and so far,
okay.
yes.
Yeah, we don't have the analytics yet. Okay.
We've been playing with it in the last week, but we just did one for our podcast that we dropped on avian flu for Bio from the Bayou, our podcast. In 24 hours, it has more engagement than they would usually have because we had it optimized for Instagram, for LinkedIn, and for Facebook is what we did to try it out to begin with. We've had more engagement on each than we usually get for podcast drops in 24 hours. So anecdotally, yes. And it's interesting the different nuances and how we look at it. And we're like, oh, this is more for that audience without having to think about how you write for that audience. And that's where I think, you know, Jasper AI and companies that are really focused on a specific niche. And I'll say the thing I like about Jasper AI and why we're becoming a business partner or business client with them as well is they had a healthcare vertical that they focused on for marketing, which dovetails really nicely with life science and academic medicine, and we're a bit in both. And so we have found that because they probably have had some trainings in their model on these kinds of things, that it's exceptionally helpful in that space.
Thanks.
If anybody wants to meet them, I'm happy to make an introduction to them as well. Next slide. And there's much more. Like as we talked about, you can create, I'm not going to throw up examples of these, but you can say, write me a process on this just with bullets. You know, here are the things I want to have in a process. You can say, you know, write me a procedure and drop in some bullets of information. You can ask for full policies. You can ask for templates. And if you just throw in bullets of information, it gives you a really nice start that saves you that hard point. If you're like me, editing is so much easier than creating something from scratch. And having anything to start from is great. And we use it for everything in the office along these lines. For the Alliance for AI in Healthcare, we're using it to help craft our election process and things, because it's easier to do that than starting from scratch. And you're able to say, hey, optimize it for an organization like this, where our goals are this, and it'll tweak it for you without you having to figure out how you do that on your own. And that's why I love using these for, you know, these tools, these partners, these colleagues, however you want to call them, for everything that we can think of. Because as Marc said earlier, any way you can save time frees you up to do other things. And as most of us, we're doing lots of things that are A, for our direct pay job, but are B, to help the institution raise their profiles where we're not paid for. And if we can bring down the time it takes us to do those things and still do them well, that's incredible and allows us more time and maybe a chance to go out to dinner with your friends or something instead of working late every night. Next slide, please. As always, I really want to thank my team, Elaine Ham, our executive in residence, who is also the executive director of the Alliance for AI in Healthcare. So anyone who's interested, I'm going to pass you on to her. Carolyn Schofield, our assistant director of marketing communications, Maggie Gentry, our clinical marketing manager, and Maggie was one of our prime drivers, and she's why I know how to use a lot of these AI tools. She digs in, uses them for all kinds of things all the time, and is really focused. And one person I was remiss in leading off of here is Eric Malamud, who is our business development fellow. He's a graduate student who, much like Marc's John, loves all things AI, is incredibly inquisitive and curious, and he is doing a survey of how we use AI across Tulane, but also how it's used in the broader world. And if anybody ever wants to pick his brain on that, he loves talking about it. Let me know. Be happy to introduce you. But he's absolutely a tremendous individual as well. I've learned so much from all these people and have so much more to learn. But like without them and without the team, we don't get anywhere. And Marc and I talk about this all the time, how your team and their ability to dive in and buy into this is really what drives it. And if people won't, it's what you make of it, and you have to make something of it to make it useful. And then the next slide. That is it. Here is my contact information and how to get a hold of me. It's my mobile, my email, and LinkedIn. And please grab me on LinkedIn. It's a great way to connect, and you can see who I know. If there are people in this field you want to meet, ask me to introduce you.
Thank you so much, James. Before we move on to, and then Marc has been wonderful going through and answering some of the questions that have been coming in. But James, I have a question before we get to some of the questions that have been sent to us beforehand. Customer discovery, how are you using this in particular for customer discovery? And if you have an example of how you've used it for that. Or maybe a particular event or something.
Yeah, so we use it for a lot of what we do is finding companies or people who are in areas that we're interested in. We are not just marketing innovations, we're marketing people as key opinion leaders. We're looking for things to bring into either the research enterprise or academic health system. And so like we kind of did with TVANT, that was one thing where we're looking at the marketing report, but figuring out who is out there who might be interested in vaccine adjuvants and where they're going. We've dropped in kind of the full abstracts for that. We've dropped in papers and said what companies are out there, what foundations are out there, what other academic entities are out there who are in this space. And again, you have to go back through and cull your data a little bit and make sure it's right. We've seen hallucinations in some of that, but it's a really great way to figure out who might be there, or if we're looking for solutions. We've thrown in what solutions exist for X problem in healthcare that we're trying to solve, and I've seen kind of what companies have come back. And again, depending on which portal you're using and how current their data is, it may or may not be as useful as Google, but it's always interesting to give you kind of a starting point to go from.
So the one that I really like is perplexity.ai, because it's like it's going to be the AI version of Google, and it might, and I say this not knowing what I'm saying, it might actually be a Google killer. And the benefit of it is when you do a search, like if we need market information, you could do it verbally. I'll say, well, what's the US market for diabetic retinopathy in 2026? And not only does it give you an answer and a summary, but it actually gives the citations of where it pulled that answer from. So you can go directly to the links and confirm that information is correct. So stuff that used to take me 5 hours to do market research on, I can do in about 45 seconds.
And that's live data, right, Marc? for the perplexity.
Yeah.
As I recall. Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's something we also we use Jasper for that. I just started playing with that. Where for our podcast today, I was telling Kirsten this earlier, is like we were optimizing our description, and on this little plus, it's like, would you like to know additional resources? And so you could throw something in and look up additional resources, and some of those might be potential customers, which is interesting too. And again, I'm about a week into playing with that, but it is something that I'm really enjoying. And playing with a tool that has a dashboard is geared towards you, where you have a customer discovery person. We're going all in on that and seeing how we can use it. But there, you have to look for your organization, I think, at what your goals are, and ours are a lot more marketing focused given what we do. If you're much more on the front end of tech transfer, there may be a different tool that's ideal for you.
Great. We are at the hour mark. We are going to stay on a bit more. This session is actually scheduled for a bit longer, but we know a lot of people usually have to leave at the hour mark. So we do have a survey. We always like to ask people about what they thought of the session, if they have ideas for future sessions. So please do answer those, these very few questions before you go. If you have a chance to, it'll show up as you leave the room, or you'll be receiving the survey afterwards. Katie can also put it into the chat. The slides actually will be sent to you sometime early next week, as well as a copy of or a link to the presentation as well. So that question was just answered, was asked as well. So next question. First of all, it was a thank you for that. It's been such an informative session. James, do you get much engagement from pharma and VCs when you market on LinkedIn?
So we get some. We've actually had a few people interact. Again, it's using AI to do it is newer, but we've always found some engagement on LinkedIn. But again, it's hard for me to say it's just because of LinkedIn, because we also have a beating mindset where we're out at every event. And so a lot of the reason I think we get engagement is because we're also physically touching people at the same time, and they're thinking of us, or it probably because our phones have been near each other. We may bump up in the algorithm for LinkedIn because of that, because all that factors in. So I can't say it's just because we're doing it on LinkedIn, but we do get people who see things on there or see our posts, or off of our Twitter feed where we summarize our research papers and do stuff, and we'll ask about it. It's not constant, but it's enough that I find a lot of value in it.
All right, great.
Mark, do you guys do the same stuff? Do you see the same thing? I'm curious.
Yeah, we do. We get a little. It's a little bit, but what I found over it's not an AI specific answer, but what I found is that people just kind of get a sense of who you are and what you do. And so, when we post, hey, this technology is available or something, do we necessarily get a one-to-one thing? No, but when over the course of a year, when we're putting out what we do as an institution and what kind of discoveries we have, that gets noticed. And so it'll be, you'll get known for, immunology, and you'll start to get a little more heat. And then when you have the conversation, someone will say, oh, I've been following the page and I've seen a few things, and then I wanted to reach out. So it's a little bit more like
that brand
about
awareness,
building a brand. Yeah.
That does give me an idea for a new prompt, though, to say optimize these posts for VCs and optimize these posts for biotech or pharma companies on LinkedIn, which I haven't done before, but now I'm going to try.
All right, next question. And this is actually an area that we talked about a little bit in our prep call, which is about the use of AI in term sheet development, license negotiations, and actual license drafting. How do you see that developing as well? Let's start with you, Marc.
Oh yeah, done, doable and done. So you can create an Excel spread, or a Word table, and say these are the terms, and then please merge this into the agreement and send an email. Doable. So what I actually think is going to do, and maybe James, Elaine, and I was publicly once, is I do think you're going to start negotiating using AI. And I actually think somebody wants to come up with a business that'll probably raise money, but ultimately be a failure. It's like do a Dutch auction for licensing, where you put your agreement in and your terms in, they put their agreement and their terms in, and it automatically searches for the overlap and says, like, you actually have agreements. I think that's coming sooner than later. Somebody's going to try to do that. So one of the things that we have done is, so say we send a license out with terms, and we get language back in the non-financial terms, but there'll be changes in language of liability and changes of things that are the non-financial stuff. And we actually, when I say we, it's never me, just to be clear. It's other people in the office. we'll say, okay, look at this language and create a response that is more advantageous to NYU. And it will rewrite the edit that is more favorable to you. And we send that. So we've actually used it to figure out, like, how could we take that, change it, accept some of it, but actually return it to be something that's more university friendly. Now, I think eventually you'll wind up into sort of a mutually assured destruction of AI, because if we have language and they say, well, make this language more favorable to us, and we say, well, make it more favorable to us, and they say, make it more favorable to us, I think actually in the end, that's going to help harmonize license terms in the way like the US Bolt agreement is kind of helping push some of the terms for this. I think you're going to start to see some harmonization of terms and homogenization of terms, which I actually think is overall a net positive. So we stop dickering about our preferred clause in the language and start to have things that start to look more similar across more deals.
Great. Sounds like we should have another session though on AI and licenses.
On that, if I hop in real quick,
yes,
Marc
please.
alluded to this, but something we've talked about is, for those of you who know Elaine Ham, she used to be in tech transfer. She was a VC and still does some investment, CEO of companies. She and Marc have talked about doing a mock negotiation together to see what happens with their must-have, like to have and can live without, and seeing what AI does. And I'm so here for that and cannot wait for that to happen.
And you're mentioning it now, so it will happen, I'm sure. So, I'll text Elaine after this.
Also, it'll be entertaining to watch the two of them. We can all place
Always
bets.
entertaining. All right, James, next question to you. Because you talked about using Jasper. Someone asked about what AI app you used before Jasper, and then also about your preference of Jasper perhaps over Microsoft Edge Copilot. But a lot of these all get you somewhat to the same ends. But yes, do you want to talk briefly about that?
Yeah, so we started with ChatGPT, and quickly, as soon as there was a paid version, went to that, and so we could do a little more with it. And that's more for kind of, I found ChatGPT have the ability to do a lot of different things, and you can customize it by putting in profiles of different things, and it takes a little more effort, and what we do is much less pre the ability to have public disclosure. And so for us, it's a little easier to do a lot of those things. We've also used on the comms, marketing, communication side, Carolyn likes Claude way more for what she does when she's writing content. She found it a lot more iterative, easier to use, the ability to drop PDFs and other things in. So it all depends on what you're getting to or what you want to happen, what you use. And I've used different things for different pieces, but because so much of what I do is even business development is more or less marketing. And then we also have the marketing for our hospital systems, our doctors, those kinds of things. That's why I've kind of migrated towards Jasper now. It's what our need is most. But it all comes down to what you want to accomplish. And I'd say look out there and get the list of the top 10 things and the pros and cons. Because I looked at the list of the 2024 best AI tools and started to look at what's out there. And that's how I found out about some things that I didn't know about before. Because there's always new stuff coming up.
Yeah, and a lot of that is what I mentioned, like this I call it a small language model. It's not necessarily small, but they're going to be bespoke models that are trained to do specific tasks, and they're going to do the specific tasks way better than the generic model. Like it's the difference, maybe not a terrible analogy, the difference between Google and Wolfram Alpha, right? They're just tuned differently. And so something that is a model for marketing and business development is going to tweak the model so that it gives more marketing and business development outputs and making it easier for the user. And you're going to see that. And we already do. You're going to see like, this is a thin slice to do this. This is a thin slice to do this. They may, in the end, have all been built on some of the open source stuff that's out there, or they might be tuning it with their own proprietary code, but you're going to start looking for applications. So that's where like the bots, it's going to start looking more like apps that are AI enabled than a large language model that does everything for everybody.
Which really gets down to what you said earlier. I think it's how you train it, right? Like the backbone of all of them is similar. It's how they've been trained and what have they been trained to do and how they've been optimized.
Right. there are only so many words in the English language, and you can move them around however you want, but there's, it's all trained on words for the most part.
All right, next question. How do you get behind paywalls, for example, for market research data, or do you? And also, how do you get contact information of the companies that the AI identifies? James, maybe that's first one's to you.
Yeah, for again, a lot of it still, AI is a great, useful tool and colleague, however you want to call it. But when it comes to contact information for us, it's still, it's that hand-to-hand block and tackle, person to person. You can't build a relationship necessarily with AI. It can give you who perhaps you should go to for that. So most of those come through our network still. We're not using AI to find contact information as much because we want those warm intros. So that still comes down to who's in my LinkedIn network, who do I know who knows people of that company, or do I know someone of that company, and really getting down to the fact that it's a tool to augment our job, but I don't think it's going to replace that piece. I don't know, Mark, if you're able to use it to get contact information, and behind paywalls, it doesn't really do that either unless you're paying for something that has subscriptions to behind those walls and is using that data. Those problems still exist. It doesn't solve those.
Yeah, no, it can't go through a paywall. Although, obviously the New York Times is suing OpenAI, who had like one account to the New York Times and then went through that account and then pulled all their information out. So I'm not saying somebody didn't do that, but no, it can't do that. As in terms of the contact information, I mean, I would just write a prompt that says, find the email address profile of, Gilead Sciences, and tell me who's the head of, who's the head of business development, and can you find an email for that? And it probably will.
Next question is about the resources available at your institutions, and how much of this was self-driven versus experts or resources available at your institutions? I mean, it sounds from what I've heard from what you're saying, a lot of this has been self-driven, but are there experts at your institutions or other resources that you were able to use? Marc, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So we did have our IT group was ahead of us. So they kind of figured out the boundaries of things, and the benefit that we have, and this is one of the sort of like large institution things, is we just made a commitment in Langone Health that we were going to use AI in everything. So the institution basically gave everybody a green light to do what they wanted. So we had some talent on our IT staff who said, look at it this way. We can, they kind of gave us a little bit of guardrails, but the reality is everything that we created was self-done. We didn't go and reach out to IT and say, how do we do this? We just kind of, we did, it was brute force in the beginning to grind through most of the work, but we had experts who knew how the system worked and who could give us suggestions on, well, kind of think about writing a prompt like this versus writing a prompt like that. But once we did that, then we as our group, actually, or John at the time, is what were the people who were training other departments within Langone Health to do the work too. So there is a little bit of a run up to it. I'd say a couple of months. But then the ability to translate that information to other groups, it becomes a lot more straightforward. So I would say you don't need to have access to your computer science department or a lot of resources from your IT department. You could probably, we probably would have been able to do everything we did. It might have taken us 45 days longer without those internal resources.
Yeah, and for us, as you probably got, it was much more bootstrap for us, Kirsten. It was just kind of ground up for us. Now our institution fairly quickly got on up supporting it and trying to figure it out. And I'll say the one benefit of Hurricane Katrina for us at Tulane, there were not many benefits at all. But one is that we restructured the entire university. And as part of that, the computer science department was done away with for a period of time and brought back around 2013 as only an AI and machine learning focused. So everyone in that department is in this field. And while we're an AAU university, we're one of the smaller AAU universities, but the fact that our computer science department is entirely focused on this, and that the degree program they developed requires anyone getting that computer science degree to apply it to another discipline as well. It's not just computer science, it's applied to medicine, music, whatever, has really brought kind of AI and machine learning throughout the kind of lexicon of the university as both an academic enterprise and a potential outcome.
All right, James, really quickly, does Tulane have institutional licenses with any of the tools you're currently using, or is it all just the free? It's just
full institutional. No, we're getting a business license with Jasper. It's with our legal right now, so waiting for that. And that'll give us 10 seats. So We'll be able to use it as our team, but like full institutional, not yet. We haven't had the budget support from central IT or anything like that to do those things yet. I imagine that will come in the future as this becomes more prevalent.
Okay, great, thanks. Marc, I'm going to direct this one towards you. If you can answer it, it says, can you speak to how you envision your organizations moving towards utilizing AI in patient care, considering the higher stakes involved? I don't know if that's something that's kind of outside of your purview or within it.
Well, that's how we started. We were using AI in patient care, and then we came next. So there are a couple of really easy areas. I mean, not easy to accomplish, but easy to consider is things like imaging. So we have our radiology department does something like 1 million radiology images a year. And so looking at 300,000 breast images to see if you can find signs of cancer earlier. And TLDR, you can. So we developed an algorithm that's actually picking up 4 new cancer diagnoses in 1,000 scans, which doesn't seem like a lot unless you're one of those 4 people. And one of the things that's actually kind of interesting is the things that we're picking up are things that the human eye can't see, but a computer can see. So you can start to see issues of like, can you diagnose earlier? Can you be more precise earlier? We used it for things like we ran our first use case. That was why we went all in on AI. Were 2 things. One was what we call a comorbidity table, which is we take like the 50 things that patient outcomes that have comorbidity, like X and Y leads to a patient like having a negative outcome, and we actually ran the patient records through that table, and we're able to reduce comorbidities by a pretty significant percentage. And the second one was a 30-day readmit model, which is how likely is this patient to come back into the hospital, be readmitted within 30 days, which is important for 2 reasons. One is that the patient has to come back in, bad for the patient. The other is the reimbursement rate for healthcare when you have to be readmitted is the insurance companies are kind of like, well, you didn't do it the first time, so it's on you the second time. So the reimbursement rate for a readmitted patient is much lower. Between those 2 things, we save $50 million a year. So that's the laser beam one. So there, I mean, the potential for AI to revolutionize the care of patients, it actually can't be underestimated. Yeah. The only thing I'll say in the end of that is there's a lot of AI-enabled startups like, we're going to look at 1 million models and predict this. I haven't seen very many of those pay off. We are starting companies that are AI-enabled to build algorithms, but the reimbursement for an AI solution I think I saw the first one come across within the last month and a half. So it sounds cool, but if you can't reimburse it, that solution's probably not going to make it. So there's this balance. I think a lot of internal care of patients can be fundamentally better through AI, but the Star Trek-y kind of stuff, I think, is emerging now. And we're starting to see places where, yeah, maybe you get reimbursed, or maybe that in some cases the patients are willing to pay $100 to have AI look over their scans or something like that. But it's not as impressive as everybody wants it to be right now.
Now, and where I see it going, Kirsten, is medical records are imperfect, and the more you learn about them, the more you learn about the fact that basically what you put in is what you get out, and the way coding is done is when you have people who perhaps could benefit from clinical trials and get that that future of medicine, that next level of medicine. Often there aren't codes that you can pull from that let you know that they would actually qualify. But AI can search entire records and pull out things from notes that can't happen otherwise, and give people access to care that they might never have been presented before, that could improve, save, do whatever to their life. And that's why we're really passionate, why we have Eric looking at what companies are out there. How might we bring that in, either for ourselves at Tulane through Tulane Medical Group and our own clinics, or with our healthcare partner of LCMC Health, and working with them to bring it in together in our clinics we have with them. But how do we impact that human condition? And it's honestly, it's one of the most amazing things that came out of COVID for me, was getting thrown more into healthcare. And I know you've heard me talk about this, but AI has not just such potential for the academy as a whole, but healthcare. It's incredible what it's going to do for us. And I know it sounds scary, but it's not going to be the doctor taking care of you, but the doctors that use it are going to give you much better care. And the nurses and the techs and everyone, it's just going to increase efficiencies and increase access, I think, in ways we haven't had before. Get off my soapbox.
Absolutely.
Somebody in the hospital said last or a couple of months ago, doctors will not be replaced with AI, but doctors using AI will replace doctors who don't.
Absolutely.
Like that's probably, and I think that statement is true in tech transfer.
And better outcomes for all of us in the end. Yeah. Kind of going along with that is, so AI has certain efficiencies right now, but there's still the quality, the QC that we talked about before. Can you talk about the amount of time that is taking to do that QC? It's, there's a certain amount that it is taking right now. Do you see that changing over time? But I imagine right now you're QCing most things before sending them out.
Yeah, I mean, for us, especially since we use it in operations more than what James is doing, but I'll be stealing all his stuff soon. It's more. You just have to remember it is a tool and not a solution.
Yeah.
And so it is a tool for a human to use, and a human has to look at the results, and a human has to agree that the results are the one that are similar to what they would come forward with. So, it isn't perfect, but it's saving a lot of time and effort on the work, but you still have to look at it. And one of the principles that we talk about in the office is I want everybody to use this. I want you to solve your own problems, but in the end, you're still responsible. That you can't say the AI did it. That's not the answer, right? The AI might have done it, but you didn't catch it, and that's on you. Because I can't hold AI accountable, but I can hold people accountable. And that's so to just always remember that there's a buffing over the top of that a person has to do to make sure that things make sense. Now, once we get prompts that we like, like I said, it might take us 40 to 60 hours to create a prompt that does everything that we want it to do. Once that's in place, the QC of the next 100 times we use it, pretty modest. I mean, you can rely on it, but humans get lazy, and so you have to have that mindset of we're always going to check and we're always going to check.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I was thinking about your slide earlier, Marc, where you talked about the small tech transfer office and the large tech transfer office. And I mean, the thing is, it doesn't matter what office you're in, you're still resource constrained. And this is a resource to help you with that tremendously, hopefully in the long term. But you still are going to need the people to make sure your output actually is top quality output.
Yeah, there's an ante in. I mean, and there's no mistake about that. But what I would say to everybody is that ante is probably 10 grand and 3 months.
Yeah.
And no matter what size institution you're in, you probably figure that out.
Yeah, and that's why I like the analogy of treating it like either a junior colleague or an intern, because you have to check their work. So it's there to make you more efficient to do some things, but you still got to check it before it goes out the door.
I did hear somebody call it a motivated toddler. I think it's a little better than that.
The robot overlords are not going to be happy with you, Marc.
Until
they become motivated teens. I don't know.
I have a penultimate question here. I hear a lot of excitement. This questioner asks, do you have any stories of caution or concern that you would like to share? And I didn't give you time to prep for this question, but anything that you want to caution people about?
So it does hallucinate. So we use it a lot for PR and marketing, and you have to make sure it's not putting things in there that aren't true. And it'll make things up, and you got to read it for comprehension and not just a quick skim and assume that it's right. That's one thing for us, where it's thrown in additional things or additional information or additional science on occasion, and you just have to read it, make sure it is what you wanted out of it, and that's my cautionary thing.
But I know you're an astronaut, James. So.
Well, some people have called me spacey before, like Marc.
You're Rocket Man. No, yeah, I actually I sort of touched it. The last answer is humans are fallible and lazy. And so the more you rely on these tools, the less likely you are in a month or 2 months or 3 months to question the tool, or to question the application of the tool. And so I worry a lot about drift, about, yeah, this is fine for now. It's good. Oh, it's really good. Oh, and then it's like, it's coming back and you're not thinking, am I sure? Did I look? I know it was great the last 10 times. Will it be great the 11th time? And so my concern is that you like we all do, right? You have a change management thing or something, and you make a real push and everybody's really excited. And then after the excitement leaves, do we continue to question the outputs? Do we continue to think about the things that we're doing? And are we just turning that part of our brain off? You know, the best example I could give is like, how many of you, well, all of us use Google Maps, Waze, whatever, right? And some of us on this call are old enough to remember when those things didn't exist and you actually knew how to get places without a phone. And now think about, could you get somewhere without your phone right now, even a place you've been to a dozen times? You know, would you actually know how to get there efficiently? Somebody yesterday said he actually can't get out of the West Village anymore because the streets aren't linear. So like he gets lost until he brings out his phone, right? So 20 years ago, you knew how to get from A to B without somebody telling you how to get to it. Right. Now you don't, and you kind of don't think about it. And I do worry about that as these things become more pervasive, more universal, that we'll stop thinking about why we're using them in the first place. And that's, I think, kind of dangerous.
All right, I'm going to leave on a more positive question, or actually a summary. What are the kind of main points that you're hoping that our audience is going to have taken away from today's discussion? Or maybe action items?
I'll throw it. Don't be, you know, what I started. Don't be afraid. Use it, leverage it. You know, if you don't know how, hit one of us up and ask how have you used it. It's, you know, it is dive in and try it. It does, and that's my thing is like, you know, try it. And if you don't, you will get left behind.
Yeah, and I think the way I like to think about it is, and it's a little bit, this will be more positive than it might sound, is figure out how you want to use these tools before somebody tells you how they want you to use those tools. So as long as you're using it as your tool to do the things you want to do, and what is it leave you to do that you want to do? Somebody had a question about upskilling and things like that, right? If you use them and embrace them and define the things that they make your job better, and then freeing you up time, it gives you a lot of freedom to say, well, now I have 7 hours a week I didn't have before. I want to do more. I want to learn more. I want to expand into a different area. If you wait until somebody says, you know what I think AI can do, your job, you know, you're not in as good a position. So it's a little bit of, it's unavoidable. Embrace it to the extent that you can, and define how it works for you versus letting somebody define it for you.
It's a terrific way to end it. Well, thank you. There was so much information in today's webinar. I want to thank both of you for going through all of it with us. We'll be sending out the slides and the links to the presentations and this recorded webinar later. I know that people are going to be wanting to review this again with all the information you provided. Thank you so much for doing this today, both of you. Thank you to our audience for joining us as well. We really appreciate you being here and asking so many questions. And I really am just so thankful. Yes, Marc, yay. Marc has been teaching all of these on the side to James and me as well.
Why didn't we get hearts, Marc?
I was going to say, you're two of my favorite people.
Yes.
So.
All right. Well, always so wonderful to talk with both of you. Thank you guys again for everything today. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you again on another webinar soon. Take care, you guys.